Hi, my name is Yanina and I'm from Ukraine. So, the history of Ukraine. Today I want to talk about its highlights, phenomena in the past that determine our present. Ukraine, a country and a state. So, first of all, I want to divide two notions. First one is Ukraine as a sovereign state. As a sovereign state, Ukraine finally restored independence in 1991. So, we have our own state only for 30 years now. But much of our history has been a struggle for independence. A previous and unsuccessful try to be independent was in 1918, when Ukraine declared independence. But then the Soviet Union happened. Second notion is Ukraine as a country where Ukrainian nation lives. Ukraine as a country and Ukrainians as a nation have existed for hundreds of years. The self-identification of Ukrainians dates back to the times of Kyivan Rus, to the Cossack state and finally to modern Ukraine. Basic geography and prehistory. The Dnieper River is the main river that runs through the whole territory of Ukraine. For centuries it was an important north-to-south trade road. In the south there is the Black Sea, through which an ancient Greek sailed and founded cities on the coast. The territory of Ukraine is divided into steppe and forest. Steppe. A horse was domesticated in steppe. Different nomadic tribes, most of them Turkic, lived there for centuries or moved through the steppe. Also known as wild fields, steppe was a place where later Ukrainian Cossacks appeared. Forest, steppe and forest. Here settled people developed agriculture, in particular the Tripilla culture. Later, in this part of what now is Ukraine, first major cities in Kyivan Rus would appear. Agriculture has always been essential for Ukraine, in particular due to the high concentration of the most fertile soils of Chernozems. Kyivan Rus. In the 5th century, Slavic tribes, the ancestors of Ukrainians, settled in those territories. In the 9th century, the Vikings arrived by the Dnieper River and led the state of Slavic tribes, Kyivan Rus. Originally, Rus was the name of the territory of several northern regions of modern Ukraine, with a center in Kyiv city. Later, the territory of Rus increased to what is now western Ukraine, Belarus and parts of western Russia. Kyivan Rus became a powerful and influential medieval state. Had a legislative code, adopted Christianity. It had close relation with the Eastern Roman Empire. Among the prominent rulers of that time was Kiev Prince Yaroslav the Wise, who built majestic churches and libraries in the city. Also, for diplomatic reasons, he married his children to other European monarchs, for which he was called the father-in-law of Europe. When the Mongol TATARS occupied most of Kyivan Rus in the 12th century, the center of the state was transferred from Kiev to the unconquered Kingdom of Galicia and Volhynia, which is now the western regions of Ukraine. The rest of the Rus, was now as Russia, was under the control of the Golden Horde and paid a special tax to the Mongol Khans, Lithuania or the Golden Horde, the legacy of Kyivan Rus. In the 14th century, the main part of Rus, including Kiev, became a part of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania and Rus. Although Lithuania conquered the former Rus, some territories voluntarily agreed to join. Culture, legislation and religion of Kyivan Rus were particularly important in Lithuania. This multicultural, powerful state included most of what now is Lithuania, Belarus and Ukraine. The rest of the territory of former Rus, including the Principality of Moscow, was under the rule of Golden Horde. The culture of Lithuania inherited a lot from Kyivan Rus. At the same time, Moscow adopted many features from the Mongol Tatars. However, today Russia is trying to identify Rus exclusively with Moscow. In the middle of the 16th century, Lithuania merged with Poland to form the Republic of the Commonwealth, and most of the Ukrainian lands came under the rule of Poland. Ukrainian Cossacks. From the 15th century, the Cossacks emerged in the Ukrainian steppe. The Cossacks were runaway peasants from Lithuania, Poland and Muscovy who aspired to become free people. They led a specific way of life, lived in self-organized communities, were skilled warriors, had a democracy electing their leaders, hetmans. The Cossacks protected Ukrainian lands from the dangers of the steppe, in particular from the Tatars, hunts for slaves. Sometimes they participated in military campaigns of neighboring states. The Cossacks created fortified centers named Sich, the most famous of which was in Zaporizhia. In the middle of the 17th century, the Cossacks, under the leadership of Hetman Bogdan Khmelnytsky, started the war for independence from Poland. As a result, the Cossack state emerged. Unfortunately, 30 years of revolutionary process ended with the Ukrainian Cossacks came under the control of the Russian Empire and later were brutally destroyed by Catherine II. Ethnic diversity of Ukraine, Crimean Tatars. For centuries, many ethnic minorities have lived side by side in Ukraine: Greeks, Bulgarians, Jews, Russians, Belarusians and others. However, there are several indigenous nations who do not have another nation-state outside of Ukraine. Except Ukrainians, those are Crimean Tatars, Crimean Karatas and Krimchaks. The ancestors of Crimean Tatars are the Turkic tribes that lived in the steppe of the Black Sea coast. Most Crimean Tatars are Muslims. Their own state, the Crimean Khanate, existed in the Crimean Peninsula from the middle of the 15th century to the end of the 18th. After the first annexation of Crimea by the Russian Empire in 18th century, as well as under Soviet Union rule, the Crimean Tatars were persecuted, including forced relocation outside of peninsula. After the annexation of Crimea in 2014, Crimean Tatars are again being discriminated by the Russian government. Ukraine between two empires. At the end of the 18th century, most of the Ukrainian lands became part of Russian Empire, and the western regions became a part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. In Austro-Hungarian Empire, the monarchy was limited by the constitution, and Ukrainians, despite oppressions, had certain rights, including being able to attend Ukrainian schools. Instead, the Russian monarchy was absolute, and one of the goals of the state policy was to absorb other cultures. The only dominant culture had to be Russian. For example, the empire banned the publication of literature in Ukrainian language. The Ukrainian intelligentsia waged a national liberation struggle, in particular through the organization of secret political clubs. However, the government fought against such manifestation. Ukraine as a part of totalitarian state. At the beginning of the 20th century, several attempts to become independent failed. Among them were a proclamation of independence of the Ukrainian People's Republic and the Western Ukrainian People's Republic, and their further unification to one state. But in 1921, Ukraine, except Western Ukraine, became a part of the Soviet Union. After that, Ukrainians suffered repression and even genocide. The artificial famine of the Holodomor killed from 4 to 10 million people. During World War II, the Soviet Union also occupied Western Ukraine that before was a part of Poland. So, after a long time, Ukrainians found themselves in one state. During the World War II, there was a Ukrainian insurgent army that fought both against the Nazis and the Communists. A significant number of Ukrainians fought in the Soviet army. All of Ukraine was under Nazi occupation, and the total loss of World War II was about 10 million Ukrainians, including 1.5 million Jews. As a war winner, the Soviet Union consolidated its power over Ukraine until the collapse of the communist state in 1991. Then Ukraine became independent and sovereign state with international recognition. But right now we continue our struggle for freedom during the Russian war against Ukraine. In this video, I focused on the broad history, bypassing major struggle for independence, Soviet Union period and modern history. There will be another videos for it. Unfortunately, for a very long time, the history of Ukraine were purposely manipulated for political and propaganda reasons. So, thank you for your interest in Ukrainian point of view on our own history.